I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're unleashing a new perspective on happiness with an amazing author. His name is Dr. Garry McDaniel, and he has penned a book you're just going to love. It's called Pawsitive Wisdom, Canine Insights for a Happy Life. In a world filled with stress and endless demands, Garry shows us how dogs, through their loyalty, playfulness, and unconditional love, hold the key to a more joyful and balanced life. Backed by real stories and practical exercises, this heartwarming guide offers 7 dog-inspired secrets to help individuals, families, and even organizations thrive. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Garry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Logan. Thank you so much.
Love the book, love having you on the show. I have thought for years that if we could manifest the qualities of dogs, the whole world would be a much better place because they're kind, they're loving, they're good, they're loyal, they have unconditional love, they're brave. They're the best part of this world, I think. What do you think, Garry?
I think that's absolutely the case, and I wish I had recognized it sooner in my life, but I'm glad I finally did, and that I was inspired by a dog to write the book.
Tell me about your dog inspiration.
Well, I grew up, I mentioned to you that I lived in Texas, and so I grew up in Central Texas as a young man. And our relatives had farms or ranches everywhere in Central Texas. And my parents were the kind of people who said, if you can catch it, you can keep it. And so I grew up with all kinds of pets, lizards, snakes, turtles, cats, dogs, everything.
Yeah.
And so, but I found I always had a special relationship with dogs and have had dogs all my life. And I know you have 2 Jack Russell Terriers now. And so I had a great little Springer Spaniel named Panda. And what your readers may not know is I'm a professor, a business consultant, and oftentimes a professional coach with executives to help them become better leaders. And I was out walking my dog one day thinking about a guy I was coaching, an executive who was very, very resistant, he was a very unhappy man. And he was very resistant to any ideas or even thinking critically about how he could improve. He was great at telling other people what's wrong with them, but he didn't want to hear anything about what was wrong with him. And so I was out walking with my dog and watching him go zigzag back and forth out in this field and thinking, he's always happy. Well, if this little guy could talk, what would he tell this guy? And then I started to ruminate on that and thought, that's a good question. What would my dog tell him to live a happier life? And so I began to interview people like you, friends, neighbors, colleagues at work who had dogs, and do some, research with the canine research centers to find out what is it we think, why we like dogs so much, and what could they tell us? And what I found was the same 7 qualities came up over and over and over again. But this is why we like dogs. And these are elements of happiness that if we incorporated into our life, we'd be a lot happier too.
Yeah. I think, and I've noticed this with my own dog, I think one of the reasons dogs are so happy is that they don't worry. I mean, we worry, and that creates a lot of stress and anxiety. I have a 15, 16-year-old Jack Russell Terrier who's got bad congestive heart failure to the point where he coughs and coughs and coughs and he yaks up this awful stuff pretty much every day. And then he's fine and he clears out his lungs that way. And he's a happy-go-lucky dog. He doesn't know that he's got a fatal disease. He doesn't know that his time is limited on this earth. He doesn't worry about it. He's just a dog. So part of it is a kind of an unawareness or unconcern about our existence. Do you understand what I'm saying a little bit? Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I will quickly admit, we have much more complex lives than dogs do.
True.
However, I also know that you and I and everybody else, all your listeners here, know sometimes when we see life or problems or challenges, opportunities through the eyes of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
it gives us some insight to act or
Exactly.
behave differently. And that's exactly what this book does, is to say, well, let's look at human life, our existence, through the lives of really mankind's best friend, the
Yeah.
dog, which has been with us forever. And yes, they do have simpler lives, but that doesn't mean we can't learn a lot from them.
Exactly, exactly. And they do teach us how to die because they die with a lot of dignity and a lot of serenity as well. I mean, I had the dog, I have a new puppy now, but he replaced a dog that died a couple of years ago. And his last act was getting out of the crate, standing up with all of his strength, walking over to my wife, not me, but to my wife. I guess he's got good judgment, and literally wanted to die in her arms. And such a
Um,
sweet little gesture, and they're great. I mean, I just obviously a big dog fan, and I think children and adults learn so much from animals, so much from dogs, because of their grace. They do seem to have grace.
That's right. And in fact, that's a great story. And it's exactly the type of story that is, I have dozens and dozens of those kinds of stories in this book. And you remind me that one of the best stories was told to me by, it's related to what you just said, was related to me by a veterinarian who'd been asked by a couple to come over and put down they had a very elderly dog that they
Mhm.
said, could you come to our house and do this? But they had their 6-year-old son also observe the procedure. They
Mm.
thought this would be a good learning experience. And at the end of after it was all over, the vet and the two parents were talking, and they said, it's too bad that dogs die earlier.
Mm.
It's unfortunate, and we don't understand why that has to happen. And the
Right.
little boy said, I know why. And they went, really?
Mm.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us. And he said, because God puts us on earth to learn to care and love for each other. And dogs learn to do it before we do, and they get to pass on quicker. And I think,
Yeah.
and again, it's like looking at life through the eyes of someone else, even a child. You think,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what insight.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to lose a pet, but I thought that was a pretty good
That was a
answer.
beautiful answer. Absolutely. God called him because he was done with his learning experience on this earth. I think that's perfect. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say.
Exactly.
Talk to us a little bit about how dogs model happiness in a way that humans often forget.
Well, again, I think what I found was the same 7 qualities came up over and over and over again when I did these interviews. And what they were was dogs are extremely loyal. They they protect us. They do jobs for us. They do, in fact, all kinds of jobs, from pulling sleds
Mm.
to caring for sick people, for disabled people, herding sheep. Just all kinds of crazy jobs. And they love the work that they do, and they're extremely loyal to us. And they're loyal to the point where um, they really don't care whether you're tall, short, fat, bald,
Yeah.
what race, religion, gender preference you got. They don't care. They love you anyway. And
Mm.
so loyalty was a really important factor. Communication was too. That came up over and over again. In fact, the American Animal Hospital Association did a survey of their members, and the majority replied with they related to dogs, but 45% of the people who they interviewed said, "My dog is a better listener than my significant other." So when
Exactly.
you think of communication and how important that is, and that's the business you're in, is
Yeah.
communication. You can
Sure.
be the smartest person in the room, and if you can't communicate and connect with other people, not just state what you say, but
Hmm.
really listen actively and hear other people, then you're not communicating effectively, and people can tell.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
loyalty,
Loyalty, communication,
communication.
listening. What were some of the other traits or secrets?
Uh, Something I'm sure you see in your dogs, play.
Mm.
They know how to play.
Yeah.
And as adults, as working professionals, what the people who research play find is that as when we're children, we understand play. Everybody plays, and we, in fact, as adults, we like watching our kids play. Play make believe or whatever. That's great, but then we start to become acculturated into work and think, oh, I can't do that. Play becomes watching someone else play video games or TV.
Yeah.
It's not doing it yourselves. And so dogs really understand that play, getting outside of yourself and really having a good time, not worrying about how you look, just having fun is important. And we need to get back to that as well.
Absolutely.
Uh,
A lot of the qualities of a dog are similar to the qualities of a child, don't you think, in many ways?
yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to get back in touch with, I call it your inner puppy. You know,
Yeah.
we're afraid to do that. I know a lot of people who are just afraid, like, oh, I can't do that. I might look stupid. So what?
Right. Exactly. Well,
Um,
once you get over the fear of looking stupid, your life becomes so much easier. I am a klutz. I'm uncoordinated. I'm bad at most physical things that I try to do, but I've embraced it. And I'm a clown about it. And it's really liberating. So I think not being embarrassed by how you might appear, dance crazy. I mean, look at Trump and his dance. I mean, dances like, a grandpa at a bad wedding and everybody loves it. So go figure. What's the reaction? I imagine it opens things up when you're working as a business consultant and you start drawing these analogies between standing out in business and being a dog. Tell us a little bit about how
it,
people react to that.
it does. And in fact, I think one of the things that makes this book interesting is
Mhm.
that it's not just a book you read from cover to cover.
Yep.
I actually have activities and exercises and worksheets throughout the book so that as people go through it, they don't just think about it intellectually. And it's really written for not just for businesses, but it's written for individuals. So an individual can read this and think, and I'm trying to push them to think critically about, well, how loyal are you? How well do you communicate? Do you take time to play? Do you love other people unconditionally? Again, which dogs do. They love
Yeah.
you unconditionally.
So forgiving is another aspect of it, right, Gary?
That's correct. So forgiveness is an extremely important aspect. Not just we carry. First of all, I'll tell you a quick story.
Sure.
I came home from work one day and it was really late. It was snowing. It was icy. It's cold. I'm tired, but I got to take Panda out, my dog out. So I take him out, and generally what we did is we would play it. He loved to, like your dogs, throw
Yeah.
a ball, he'd get it. But what the game was is he'd come about 6 feet away from me and stop, spit it out like, okay, try to take it. And I tried to
Yeah.
take it, and he'd get it. He'd run away like, ha ha ha, you didn't get me. And
Right.
so that's what he was doing. But I was cold and freezing, and I was like, oh, come here, you bad dog, and I want to get you. And he thought that's all part of the game until
Yeah.
I finally tripped him and grabbed him and dragged him back home all the way saying, you're a bad dog. And he's looking at me like, why? What? And and by the time I get home, I'm thinking, I'm such an idiot. We're doing exactly what he's always done. And
Right.
I feel like such a jerk about it. And I'm trying to think about, after I let him off the leash, he runs off and I start thinking of, what can I do to make this up to him? And he comes running back in with a toy in his mouth and spits it out and
Yeah.
goes, come on, let's play.
Right.
I'm beating myself up. I haven't forgiven myself, but he has. And
Exactly.
dogs do that. They forgive us quickly. But we carry, if we've had someone give us a slight or an injury, if it's said something, we carry it forever. And oftentimes it's something that we did. We think I made a mistake. We were talking about being kind of stupid,
Yep.
but I do
Yeah.
stupid things too, things I'm embarrassed about. But some people carry that like a badge of honor.
Hmm.
And they just have a hard time letting go of that. And I've got an example in the book about a woman. I was at a social event and she was saying, a man said, oh, our 20th year and high school anniversary reunion is coming up. I'm going to go to it. And she said, oh, that's interesting. Mine's coming up too. And I said, oh, great. Are you going to go? And she said, no.
Hmm.
And I said, why not? She goes, Well, because when I was a high school senior, the boy I was dating started dating another girl. And if I go there, she might be there, and I don't want to see her.
Can
I'm
you
like,
imagine
it's
holding on to that all these years later?
that's
Wow.
20 years. You're
Yeah.
married, you got a family,
Yeah,
and why
exactly.
aren't you mad at him, by the way? He's the
Right.
one who stopped dating you to date her. What if he's there? I mean, who cares? But
Exactly.
that's a type of example of like where it's a minor little thing, but some people hold on to that as if, oh, it's so important, and it's not.
Right.
And I'm not saying we forget the things that happen to us, but we don't have to hold on to it with that kind of intensity and beat ourselves or beat other people up for it. And that's where
Absolutely.
forgiveness is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great thing about a dog. You can yell at it, you can lose your temper at it, and he'll be back licking your face in 2 seconds and completely have forgiven you and forgotten about it. You talked about some exercises and activities in the book. Let's talk about those. Give us some examples.
Okay. Some examples would be like, let's just say, take for example, communication. I actually have an assessment. How well do you communicate?
Hmm.
So you can answer on a scale of I agree totally with this or disagree. How well do I communicate in certain situations? Do you really listen to people actively, or do we do like, yeah, I'm listening. I'm going to type on my phone while I'm listening, which
Yeah,
of course tells us, no, you're not. You're not listening.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, as soon
We
as
have,
somebody
we have,
does this, I mean, they've completely tuned you out. Can you imagine them doing the interview like this? So.
well, we have all suffered through that. And by the way, I could be in the World Olympics as a bad listener too. Uh, and so we've all made this mistake, and I continually do. But again, it's the type of thing where I have activities in there to kind of prompt people to think, how well do you listen honestly? And do you really take time to play? Do you
Right.
have something that you do where you really just get out and go do something, whether it's walking, jogging, playing cards with somebody? I don't care what it is, but do you ever get outside of yourself and just really have a good time and interact with people and have fun?
Yeah.
And again, if not, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
and something I'll mention about these qualities too is like another one was unconditional love. Dogs again love us unconditionally. They don't care who you are, big, small, fat, short. They love you anyway. They also have a very positive outlook on life. They expect things to be good.
Yeah.
I bet you know people who have a rain cloud over them all the time.
Oh, yeah. There's people who
And
have a problem for every solution. Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
expect things to be bad,
Yep.
and they're looking for it. And if that's what you look for, that's exactly what you see.
Right.
And the other thing dogs do, the seventh thing, is balance. They know when it's time to lay in the sun. They
Yeah.
know when it's time to play. They know when it's time to eat. They know when it's time to come over and just put their head on your knee and be happy to be with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They bring
so
a great sense to what you need. I mean, if you're upset, a dog modifies its behavior immediately and like wants to comfort you, right?
exactly. In fact, research is also very clear, and I discuss it in the book, is research is very clear that dogs do attend to our face. They
Mhm.
watch us and they read us. And in fact, they also, if someone else treats you badly, they notice that and they react negatively towards the other person.
Right. Yeah.
And so they again, that's one of the things what the researchers say why they were drawn to us is they're one of the friendliest animals on Earth, and
Mm.
friendliness is a huge component to success in life,
Mhm.
both with animals. Because if you think about it, and most of us don't, I didn't until I read the books about this stuff, but the most friendly animals in the world. Uh, are the most successful. So it might be fish, little tiny fish who eat bacteria out of the teeth and mouths of bigger fish,
Mhm.
and nobody bothers them,
Right.
and they're very, very successful. Dogs are extremely successful because they engage with us. They want to.
Mhm.
They enjoy it, and we enjoy that too. So we have a very good reciprocal relationship that goes back thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing the characteristics and the qualities. I was thinking about dogs, and the emotional bond that they have with us. And we could have chosen any other animal to bond with, but we chose dogs. And you think it's primarily because of their friendly nature?
Well, in fact, one of the researchers that I looked into, Brian Hare, he's at the Dog Cognition Lab at Duke University, said, we didn't just pick dogs, they picked us.
Yeah, yeah,
And so they followed the tribal bands back in the ancient days, feeding off the garbage piles because that was really good. But then became closer and closer and more trusting of us until, they were really protecting the tribe and playing with the kids and just having a great time. And
yeah,
so, and again, it's a very reciprocal relationship that we have with them, where we chose each other, and again, I love other pets
hmm,
too. In
sure.
fact, I recently had a student in one of my graduate classes from India who had his family had a pet elephant.
Wow.
And which I thought, I've never known anyone with a pet elephant. He said, "Oh yeah, it's like a big dog. They're really super smart, and they come over and they want to put their trunk around you and give you a big hug, And we
Amazing.
would play soccer with it, and you just had to be careful not to get in its way when it was trying to get the ball, you know. But we can see ourselves through the eyes of just about any animal.
Yeah.
And I think, well, I pick dogs. I think any animal can also provide that function. I just think dogs do it best.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk to us about some of the touching real life stories that you have featured in your book. Is there a standout that comes to mind or something you'd like to share with the folks at home that you think really shows a great example of how dogs can teach us to live our lives?
Absolutely. One of them, and every chapter in the book has stories like this.
Hmm.
But one of which was there was a gentleman by the name of Omar Rivera, who was a computer technician in the World Trade Centers during 9/11. He was
Hmm.
blind, and so he had a service dog, CNI dog that he went walked around with. When the planes hit the building, uh, everybody started panicking and going down the stairs, and he was afraid for his dog, and he unleashed the dog to let it go. And
Wow.
he thought, I'll just make it down the steps myself. And so he was on the 71st floor, and he got two or three floors down, and then suddenly felt that dog at his side.
Wow.
So the dog had turned around and gone back up the stairs, fought through the crowd to get to him, and then help him down. And they got out safely, okay. But that's kind of the example of, like, when we talk about loyalty, what dogs do. And there's another story about a little girl who had a boxer, got it as a puppy, and it grew up with. They got the puppy at about a year old, and what they discovered was that the people who had the dog before had a child who had emotional problems and several times tried to drown the dog, and
Mm.
so as a puppy, and so the dog was horrified of water, and
Mm.
so when the child would go into the water, it would run back and forth on the shore, like going, "Oh, get out, get
Yeah.
out, get out!"
Yeah.
But one day she was at a pier, and a boy rode by on a bicycle and ran into her and knocked her off the pier down about 20 feet into the water. And the
Mm.
way she landed knocked her out.
Wow.
The dog jumped into the water. The dog that was terrified of water jumped into the water from 20 feet up, grabbed her by the cuff of
Right.
her shirt, and dragged her over to the shore where people by that time had run down to save her. By the way, he never ever got in the water again.
Amazing.
So again, a kind of example of thinking, well, here's this dog terrified of something, did it purely out of love and care and concern for this young girl.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. There was just a story recently that a toddler wandered off, I believe, in the Arizona wilderness, and the dog was found by a Great Pyrenees, that belonged
Yes.
to a rancher, and that dog led the child back to the rancher's home, and the child's alive because of that Great Pyrenees. Just amazing. It's just, yeah, I guess you have found many, many stories like this, but there are countless stories out there that are so heartwarming.
Everybody seems to have them. When I ask the question again to someone like you, if your dog could talk, what would they tell me to live a happier life? They'd say, gosh, I really haven't thought about that, but I'm sure my dog would say this, here's a couple of things. And I'd say, well, can you think of a story, a time when that was actually manifested in the dog's life with you? And they'd say, yes, as a matter of fact, I can think of lots of examples. And that's where these stories came from. They're not made up. They're real life examples that people like you and I who had dogs could say, yes, these are real examples of where dogs made a huge difference in our life. In fact, I think one of the things I like about the book too is that it's pertinent to individuals. It's also pertinent to families. So I think teachers and parents could use this to talk to their children and help expand their thinking and appreciation of how to see the world through other people's eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you know this. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Researchers find that when most kids finish high school or college and they go into the workforce, the kids think, I'm ready for the real world of work. What people in the world of work say is, no, you're not, because they lack soft skills. They have the hard knowledge of what they learned, their academic degree, but they lack the soft skills of listening, communication, appreciating differences, working well as a team, being empathetic with other people. Those types of skills is what people lack. And that is what I think dogs can teach us, those types of skills. And that's where I think this book has got some really great opportunities for people, is to, again, think about how you apply these skills personally and help your children or students in school learn them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think dogs teach children valuable lessons. They learn to be caregivers. They learn to develop a relationship. They learn to have respect for an animal's needs, wants, to know that it's a living being that should be treated a certain way. So I think raising your children with dogs or cats or parakeets or whatever it is, but I'm a dog guy, I think really do offer wonderful, valuable lessons for children and families.
Yeah. One of the final things I'd mention is that I talk about these qualities: loyalty, communication, play, unconditional love, forgiveness, having a positive outlook, and life balance, as if they're separate. And what I think is really true when it comes down to happiness is these really fit together.
Yeah.
I think of it as a Venn diagram, they all overlap each other. And so being loyal, that's fine and good. But if you can't do the other six, you've got a problem. That affects the happiness that you'll feel in life. And the more effectively we can balance all of these together and be loyal, but also communicate effectively. Take time to play for yourself, with your family, with your dogs, right? Love other people unconditionally. Again,
Forgive.
I realize bad things happen, and I'm not saying you just say you forgive everything and walk away, but dogs do love us unconditionally and they forgive us easily. They have a positive outlook, and having life balance. All those things are important, and if you can do all of those things, you will live a lot happier life.
Exactly. Bark to that, without a doubt. Great, great interview, great book, great wisdom that you're imparting on me and our viewers. The name of the book is Pawsitive Wisdom. That's right, paws, like an animal's paws, a dog's paws. Pawsitive Wisdom. Canine Insights for a Happy Life. It is a heartfelt guide to living better by following the wisdom of our four-legged friends. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's been all mine. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time on Spotlight.